Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Red Tinted Glasses podcast. Do not adjust your sets. It is me and Calum tonight. Organised chaos is maybe the correct term for it, but we'll wait and see. In a week where the Dons finally faced a test, hopefully, in the eyes of the Scottish media, we're facing our own test as Glenn is sunning himself up in Greece. Not that we're jealous at all. But yeah, how are we doing, Calum? Have you recovered from Saturday?
I have, yes, just about. God, it was quite the day. But I'm fit and well. I'm healthy. I think the biggest test Aberdeen will face is trying to watch this, and it's just us. And what's the bigger test though? That or Glenn versus the Greek sun? I don't
Yeah, as long as he's got that, what is it, Bald Bro SPF 50 on the napper, he'll be all right.
know.
But yeah, so a trip to Celtic Park was in store for the Dons. An unchanged side. What were your thoughts on that, Callum? I know we kind of discussed maybe a change in midfield with Palaversa coming in, but maybe a shock addition to the bench.
Yeah, I think we were a little bit surprised about that. You messaged me that, which I didn't see until after the game, actually, about Palaversa. I suppose don't change a winning side. And I suppose, well, that's what we've been doing. We've been winning, so we kept the same side that beat Hearts. But it was a bit of a concern with Nisbet. There's a lot of talk on social media, in pubs, on this podcast, about whether he'd go with Nisbet or Saltcliffe, given we'd be without the ball a lot of the time, and if we're not getting chances in the 6-yard box, basically, or the 18-yard box, what can Nisbet contribute into the build up? And then we saw that change at half time, but I don't know. The first 10 minutes we did start well, and it gave me a lot of hope. It went rapidly downhill, though, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I was the exact same as you. I thought sort of first 10, 15, we were relatively comfortable enough, not looking to set the world on fire, but, trying to get our foot on the ball and play out the back a bit like you. I think Nisbet left a little bit to be desired, but I think we maybe kind of expected that going into a game against Celtic. As well, Meatov, what to get your thoughts on that? I mean, I don't know what your view was like, whether you were behind the big pillar for your 37 quid in Celtic Park or not, but yeah, a little bit nervy, especially with that attempt. Well, I thought it was going out for a goal kick, but an attempt to stop a corner, but he went sliding and nearly put himself in a world of bother.
Yeah, it sort of seemed like that was where the chaos began. Prior to that, it was okay, and in fact, he nearly takes out Engels in the process as well as getting himself in a bit of bother with that speculative effort from Engels, which hit the bar. But it did sort of feel like that was where things maybe started to go a little bit Pete Tong. And do you think that was the start of the remainder of the chaotic first half?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit like you. I think our troubles did not the typical scene, but our sort of troubles tended to stem from the back. In that first half, obviously the first Celtic goal was it was kind of a tough one, really. It was a poor pass from Nielsen that kind of put us in a spot of bother, and Ruby and Malloy sort of caught in no man's land and not really knowing what to do with themselves. I think it's kind of hard to put a little bit of blame on Gavin for that first one. He was trying to pick up two men in the box there. But yeah, when that first one went in, did you just get the feeling of, oh, here we go again? It's going to be the same old story, or did you still sort of think there was a bit of bite in the team despite what we were seeing in the first half?
It was more of the second one, and I think the collective mood around me was just, here we go again. It's going to be same old, same old. I mean, the fact that the first goal comes from the slack pass from Nilsson, and we've not seen a lot of it, but I feel like we're starting to see a little bit more of that coming in recent weeks against Hearts. There was a few that went a little bit, that were a little bit too sloppy, but then once he loses the ball, he then goes into press. Shinnie then is left with a lot to do. And then it's Malloy and Rubizic trying to fight a losing battle, essentially. Malloy certainly had a lot to do, and sort of tried to cover the ball across rather than picking up a man, which you can't really blame him for before Hatate arrived into the box.
Yeah, no, like I say, I think it maybe is coming into potentially that tiredness aspect. I don't know if we can blame tiredness on the second goal. Definitely once again a mistake, and I think that's the the frustrating thing about the 2 goals we did concede is they were really our own doing. Malloy with a really strange attempt to get the ball out of his feet. I don't know why he didn't just blast it even behind for a corner. Would have suited better. Then obviously gets a bit unlucky with his block falling right to Kyogo. Makes it 2-0 to Celtic. Like you say, was that a bit of a sucker punch that early in the game?
Yeah, a little bit. The 2 goals coming in quick succession, as I said, it just sort of felt like, oh, here we go again. This could be very, very bad. And I think that's just, sort of PTSD from previous years. I think I saw on Twitter, our last 3 games there were like 6-0, 5-0, 4-0. So to concede 15 goals and then concede 2 in such quick succession, it really did feel like it was just going to be the same thing over again. But for me, certainly, I mean, yeah, he didn't have much choice really with the first one, Gavin Malloy, but the second one, he's got to just put the ball back from where it came from, just leather it straight out for a throw in or whatever. I think he is stretching though, so he does only get a touch to it, but he's got to just put it back from where it comes from, and I don't know. It's a little bit of a concern. It's a few weeks now, that he's having these issues. Against Hearts, there was a couple of times when he, we were trying to play it from the back and he leathers it off. George Grant, I think it was. Then there was the mix-up with McKenzie in the same game, giving away the penalty against Dundee. And it's a shame because other than sort of the own goal against St Johnstone, he seemed to really recover from that well, and it looked like him and Rubezic were building a really good partnership. And I don't know whether it was just like one mistake sent him on this spiral, but he is young, he is raw, and thankfully it wasn't all that costly. But how many times are we going to say, thankfully these mistakes aren't all that costly?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. Eventually, law of averages are that they're going to bite at one point. But like you say, I think he wasn't really signed to be a starter. I think his performances have really thrust him into that spot. Still is an inexperienced young defender. But I would like to hear your thoughts sort of on whether you think there should potentially be a change in that centre half partnership. Maybe just to take that I don't want to say spotlight off Gavin, but maybe just to experiment a little bit and see how we would go with maybe someone more experienced like Angus MacDonald, or even still keeping that youthful option, looking at Jack Milne at centre half. Obviously, he came on towards the tail end at Celtic Park.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. I think keep the partnership the same because we have seen how good they can be, and I thought it was really interesting that it was Jack Milne that came on at fullback when Jack McKenzie went off late on in the game at Parkhead, and rather than putting Malloy out wide for Angus MacDonald, and MacDonald's not seen a lot of game time whatsoever, and I wonder if maybe at Parkhead it was a case of pace and fitness, because I mean Jack Milne's been involved with the under-21s and he's featured a little bit more for us this season. But I thought that was a particularly interesting one. But for me, I think just keep it the same. Even though there are these mistakes, you can hope that you can sort of play through them. And for the most part, him and Rubezic really do have, it seems like a good understanding, and it sort of works quite well with Gavin Malloy being a bit more, I don't know, I was going to say comfortable on the ball, but then there was Rubezic nutmeg and Dyson Maeda. So I think they work well, sort of the destroyer and then maybe the slightly more technical one.
Yeah, and I think as well, obviously, Gav showed himself to be a pretty capable athlete in terms of, across the pitch, and with us maybe playing a little bit of a higher line at times. MacDonald maybe doesn't suit that style as well for getting back into position. So I totally understand why Malloy starts. Like you say, although he's maybe not been signed to be a starter, his performances have definitely merited him keeping that spot. Another player that we discussed quite a fair bit in our preview and whether he was going to start was Leighton Clarkson. I think all of us were in agreement that potentially not the game for him. And I think, that was kind of proved. I thought, in my opinion anyway, he seemed like a passenger at times in that first half, just not really looking like he was going to break out of much of a jog or much urgency. Couldn't really get the time on the ball to sort of show the creative flair that we know him to have. And then obviously the big talking point being that one-on-one that he missed sort of 5 minutes before half time. Did you have your head in your hands at that one, Calum, mid-celebration?
I was absolutely fuming. I was so angry when he did that. At the time, I thought he just tried this really fancy finish, and I thought, why has he done that instead of just hitting it? It would be perfect time to get back into the game, so slow Celtic down, get maybe their crowd thinking, oh shit, maybe they are a bit better than people have been giving them credit for and things. And then it turns out it looks like he's been caught in two minds between taking a shot on a weird sort of fancy shot and playing in Keskinen. It looked like maybe he's made a decision last second and then in the end just got it all wrong. But I was absolutely livid at the time. I sort of felt sorry for him, I suppose, in that first half because, as you say, he thrives on getting in the ball in that 10 and a chance to be creative. But against Celtic midfield, there's not that chance at Parkhead, especially. And he was, unfortunately, not really involved in the game. And ultimately, I think it was the correct decision to take him off later on.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've summed it up perfectly there. I think my feeling anyway going into half time was just frustrated. Conceding the cheap goals and then missing a chance that really could have turned the game earlier than obviously what we managed to go on and turn it into, and then to make it worse for myself, with the little red TV advert in the middle, of getting a hair tutorial and a what's in my bag from Clarkson. A bit of a PR suicide there, but the less about that, the better. What was the atmosphere like in the away end? We've spoke quite a lot about how the crowd's been able to sort of rally the players and really keep them going. Was everything sort of still quite high spirited, or was there that sort of, oh, here we go?
I think it was sort of there was a little bit more frustration about the fact that, well, the way the two goals come about, of course, Clarkson's chance. There was some frustration, but I have to say the crowd did 100% in the end stay with the team more than perhaps they would have. And I don't know how much of a difference that would have made, but in the away end, it certainly seemed like even then it was still most of the noise was coming from the away end. I didn't think the atmosphere at Parkhead was good at all, other than their wee section of ultras. And it did feel sort of same old at 2-0. But at halftime, I said stranger things have happened for some reason. I don't know why. I think that maybe tells you about how much I've had to drink, that stranger things have happened about us coming back into the game. And not really stranger things have happened, because that weekend was the first time anyone's come back from 2 goals from behind in the league to avoid defeat since Inverness in November, I think it was 2010, and Graham Shinney involved in both. But I don't know what possessed me to say stranger things have happened, because really all the evidence should have been pointing otherwise to that.
Yeah, I mean, we'll blame the drink, but I mean, stranger things did go on to happen. I mean, Jimmy really reactive again with his changes. Obviously bringing off Clarkson and Nisbet for Duke and Sockler. Calum was not sober from what I was seeing before the game. Obviously the changes came with Duke and Sockler coming on. The right changes, I think, to make. And like I think it was yourself that said last week, Calum, McGrath going into the 10. And what a difference having him in the 10 was, and what a performance he pulled out for the second half.
Absolutely. I mean, maybe we're not quite as stupid as we look. Me anyway. The other two, I can't vouch for them. But the changes are absolutely spot on from Thelin, and it's interesting that it was the sort of the 2 players that we mainly talked about in terms of not sure of whether they would get the nod. Nisbet and Clarkson, they were the ones that came off. I think that was absolutely correct. Sockler and Duke just certainly allowed us. They suit us more for counter-attacking football than Clarkson and Nisbet, and just in terms of sort of direct running and pace and power, if nothing else. And then moved from McGrath in the middle of the park. I mean, Graham Gibb in the comments saying McGrath was outstanding. That might even be an understatement. He was absolutely incredible. I think he's got Star Man of the Week from the SPFL as well. I suppose it just kind of does beg the question, what if we'd started like that, but then perhaps if we're playing that fast counter-attacking where we're throwing bodies forward when we do get the chance, maybe we would have flagged later on in the game. I suppose, and maybe Jimmy T's played it to an absolute T there, if you will. But correct changes at halftime, and they paid dividends, both of them.
Yeah, no, an instant impact. A good little dink out from Nielsen, finding McGrath, and then honestly one of the most beautiful passes I think I've seen in a long time. Right into the path of Esther Sockler, who took his goal wonderfully. I've definitely been a bit of a critic of his performances in front of goal. And maybe not having that same sort of finisher's instinct as Miovski, but that was about as a Miovski-esque finish as they come. Really, really composed in front of goal from Esther. And I think, really good for his confidence as well. A fun one for all you little stat nerds out there. I saw Richard Wilson, who, if you don't follow on Twitter, you should, if you're interested in random Balkan football information. But that now makes Esther the highest scoring Slovenian player in the top flight with 2 goals. He beats out Jur Tarvner, who scored 1 for St Mirren in 2011. So do with that information what you will. Maybe it'll be a pub quiz question next week when you're out.
It could well be. It could well be. But I think, obviously, rightly so, there's been a lot of fanfare about Jamie McGrath's pass. And rightly so. Yeah, perfect. But Sivert Nielsen's once sort of gone under the radar because of that. And, I criticised his passing to give away one of the Celtic goals in the first half and mentioned about previous weeks. He made up for it. He certainly made up for it. That was absolutely beautiful. And then Jamie McGrath just sort of goes, anything you can do, I can do better. And inch perfect pass, great run from Sockler as well. And the composure, oh my goodness, as you mentioned. I mean, we've not seen a lot of that really. His goal against Frankfurt, he certainly showed it. Other than that, at times his finishing has been wayward, and it sometimes looks like if he's got too much time to think about it, that's when things go wrong. But it was an incredible finish from Esther Sockler, and yeah, absolutely delighted for him. It seems he loves playing against Celtic, and if he can keep adding to that, then that would be perfect. And it's also worth mentioning, I saw this on Twitter as well. 15 seconds from Mitov to the ball going into the back of the net. That's Jimmy Thelin football, if you ask me.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly it. That second half, it was the kind of football I think we expected from Jimmy, especially in these sort of games where we are going to be a low possession team, in our speed in transition. And like I say, just the sort of instant turnaround in the game, I think really rattled Celtic. On the hour mark, making it 2-2, and once again, brilliant work from Sockler and McGrath, and Keskinen as well. Winning the ball high up the park, and then really just decisive passing to get the ball into a goal scoring opportunity. Obviously, luckily, the deflection from Shinnie's shot, and a nice little bit of shithousery from the captain as well, to really rattle them more. But when it went 2-2, Calum, did you think there's only one winner? Because to me, it felt like the momentum had totally flipped in the game.
It's sort of, I had sort of genuine confidence. I mean, we'll touch on it just later, but when the ball was coming in from Jamie McGrath towards Rubezic for the goal that was eventually disallowed, I said goal when the ball was mid-air, before it even got to Rubezic. There was genuine belief, and it did feel like that, and it's pretty weird, to be honest, to be in this situation where, we're going to Parkhead, we've gone 2-0 down, and then all of a sudden we've come back, and there's a belief that you can actually go on and win the game. And it felt like all the momentum with us. It really felt like that. The Celtic fans felt that way as well. And more credit even to Jamie McGrath, his second assist of the game. And the way he's going down, and he still manages to get it back to Shinnie. It feels like he never gives up on a move until it's dead. Like I can't remember who it was against. It was maybe up at Ross County last season, where he went down, didn't get it, and then carried on, and it resulted in a goal. I think maybe he scored it. And there was another one at Pittodrie too. And Paul Donaldson mentions here, surely the club has to pull out all the stops it can to get McGrath signed up on an extended contract. And I don't think there's an Aberdeen fan out there that would disagree. But are you a little bit worried, Phil, that it might not happen, and worst case scenario, he goes to Celtic?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the exact thing I was discussing earlier with a couple of the guys. Not to try and stay humble here, and hypothetically, I shall preface this with. If we are still very much in a title challenge come December time, I can see Celtic throwing a ridiculous amount of money towards Jamie McGrath, purely just to try and, one, get him out of our team, or, unsettle him. But, I think Dave and the football monitoring board and Jimmy will have a stellar pitch ready for both himself and Mackenzie as well, and potentially even Duke. Who knows? To really try and keep them at the club. The run we're on, the potential prospect of European football once again. Hopefully that might be enough to maybe keep him on side, depending on who he could be looking to get offers from. But yeah, I think he's a player that, as Rio Ferdinand says, put the contract on the table, let him write the number, get him to sign it. Because what a player he's been this year.
Yeah, he's been incredible. And probably our best player last season out with Miovski too. But it is a real concern that, let's say, I'm pulling numbers out my bum here. 5,000 grand a week we offer him, 3 to 4 years. Celtic can just come in and go 10, and then he'll be tempted by that. And if that does get agreed, he's not going to stay here, or we're not going to want him to stay here if we're still in some sort of title race, when he has agreed to go to Celtic, or likewise elsewhere. He's 28. He's not really stuck around too much anywhere. This could be his last chance at sort of going down south and earning real big money too. So it's very much a worry, and I just hope that it comes out of nowhere that we get him on that new contract, because every post basically on social media I'm seeing in the replies are Jamie McGrath signing a new contract, and I just hope we're not getting set up for heartbreak.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those ones where I think if he does sign a new deal, it'll almost feel like a new signing in a way, in terms of how excited we're all going to be. But yeah, like you say, I mean, involved once again. 10 minutes later, the phantom goal for 3-2. I can almost just imagine in your unsober state how mental you were probably going in that away end when you thought Duke had scored. Was the sort of communication that there was a VAR check going on, did it come through quickly in the stadium, or
can I not remember? There was celebration, and having watched it back, it looks like Duke actually knows that it's not going to happen, but nobody else knows, which was wild. The celebrations were incredible. I mean, it felt like it feels impossible going to Parkhead, going and doing that. My top actually stayed on for the third goal. I didn't mention this. Second one, it was off. Forgot to mention that. But it was. Oh God! It just what could have been, and it's annoying actually, because Duke knows little about of it hitting him at the time, and had it not hit him, it maybe goes off Johnson. I think is marking him, and maybe that lands at the foot of an Aberdeen player, or it goes into the back of the net. So it's just frustrating that was the case. Certainly the right decision to chalk the goal off, obviously. However, not seen all that mentioned too much, and Celtic's complaints about the referees on social media. Not seen anything on the fact that Austin Trusty was facing away from the ball, only facing Rubezic and holding him in the build up to that before he wins the header. Not seen any mention of that, have you?
Yeah, no, they're very selective in their victim mentality. Our Celtic, and that brings me on to Nick Walsh. A few scares towards the end, as we were try to hold on to the point while Celtic threw their millions of pounds of players at us off the bench. Going to VAR to check a penalty, despite McCowan clearly being miles away from it being a penalty. But yeah, I want to get your thoughts on sort of his performance as a referee. His consistency, his card happy nature, his sort of willingness to allow Johnson to commit GBH on Shady Mo into the advertising boards.
Yeah. I actually think, Nick Walsh and the VAR team ended up getting all of the big calls correct, which is probably the most important thing, certainly. However, when you think back to it, and certainly look back at it, in fact, I've seen two people clipping one certain incident up where Jamie McGrath brushes past Austin Trusty, I think it was, yellow card. And then Alistair Johnson absolutely breaches Jack McKenzie. Literally a minute later, nothing, absolutely nothing, not even a foul. Incredible. I mean, Celtic had, I think it was 12 fouls, 1 yellow card. We had 15 fouls, 5 yellow cards. I don't really know how that works out, but I've seen a lot of people angry at Sivert Nilsson, which I'm really enjoying, that they're sort of getting a taste of their own medicine, because he ran that line very finely, like Scott Brown used to many times. And you look at it thinking, how the hell has he not got a booking yet? And Sivert Nelson did it brilliant. And we mentioned we don't want us to go there and be a soft touch, and we weren't that. So that is encouraging. But some of the consistency with Nick Walsh in the regular fouls was certainly interesting, and it's nothing new, really, is it? Especially when you're going somewhere like Parkhead, 59,000 Celtic fans baying for the referee's blood most of the time. But he got most of the main calls right. So, I mean, it's a tough one. It's a tough one.
Yeah, and thankfully as well, didn't cave to the shouts that have been all over Twitter recently. Going very Michael Stewart. Think of the biometrics of Celtic fans looking at the exact position of Duke's arm, and to me, it's nowhere near his arm. I'm assuming for you, it's also nowhere near his arm. But the block itself and the passion, shown by Duke afterwards was brilliant to see. And I think it's last week against Hearts and against Celtic, he's really shown himself to really be with it and really bought into the club once again.
Yeah, I think last season, it looked like he was trying to do a lot of stuff his own way, and it just wasn't. None of it was coming off for him. Whereas he's really buying into the system right now, it looks like, and he's built to do what it needs for the team. Getting back on the line, and I actually think it's really clever from Duke there. I don't think it hits his hand at all, and clearly the officials didn't think so, because they would have been a penalty. But it's actually clever for him to pull away the arm just to make sure that it doesn't go off. And obviously, if it does hit his arm, it's hit his thigh first. And the rule is, if that's the case, it doesn't matter. It's not a penalty. And the celebration was just incredible. I don't know how many times you've watched that back, but Phil, I'm definitely into double digits by a long way. It's absolutely brilliant. My best bud Duke, of course. And it was really good to see those celebrations and just the fact he's getting in there and doing his bit for the team. And it was absolutely perfect. And I was terrified, however, at the time, though, that it was going to be a penalty, because you just thought this would be so incredibly typical. We've done really, really well to get back, just stay in the game first, even, let alone get back into the game, to survive so much pressure from Celtic in that added time. It would have been so bloody typical. Oh, penalty. There we go. Game over. 3-2.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it was that. I think everyone kind of expected it to be given just purely for that. But no, I don't think you were the only one that loved the celebrations and Duke's point-saving clearance of Glenn drunkenly sending Duke a video from poolside in Kos. So I hope he didn't have to wake up to that in the morning, because I couldn't think of anything worse personally. But 2-2 was the final score, and the Dons did walk away with a point. Fair play to Paddy Tomlinson for predicting that 2-2 scoreline. And as well, it's a big point for us fighting to the end, especially with Rangers dropping points, or Kilmarnock rightfully picking up points, as Sky were refusing to allude to, and further increasing the gap between us and them, despite us going to Parkhead, is really pleasing for us to see before we face our opponents next week, Dundee United.
Yeah, there is Dundee United up next, and it's Jim Goodwin returning to Pittodrie for the first time, which will be certainly very interesting. They're doing quite well, though, surprisingly. They're fourth. I say surprisingly, and that seems harsh, but it's just the fact it's Jim Goodwin, and how badly it went with us. Fourth, 15 points, 1 league defeat so far this season. That was against Rangers. It should be another cracker. Hopefully sold out. Do you expect us to start with the same starting 11 going into this game, or do you expect Duke and Sockler, who came off the bench to such great effect against Celtic, to begin this game and hopefully can start as they mean to go on, carry on as they mean to go on off the back of the last game?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think the majority, myself included, would quite like to see the team that came out for that second half. I'd like to see McGrath getting another run out in the 10, because I just thought he looked super effective there, and he still had all the creative freedom to float out wide when he wanted to. So no, I would personally have Duke and Sockler in from the start. Whether you maybe still want to throw Palaversa in, like we said, there's a potential aspect of tiredness maybe coming in towards Nielsen. Obviously, the second half looked like a totally different player compared to those misplaced passes at Hearts in the first half at Celtic Park. So whether Palaversa comes in there, be interesting to see. But no, definitely at least that team that came out to start the second half.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, once again, it's just an absolutely brilliant position to be in, really, isn't it? The fact, we've got guys of that quality to come off the bench, and then, Palaversa coming off later as well. Not to mention Shane Morris and Vicente Epstein. Fantastic position to be in. However, Dundee United's only away defeats this season. They've not lost an away game in the league so far. I've been against Motherwell in the cup; they were knocked out, and Falkirk as well. No surprise, losing against lower league side when you're Jim Goodwin in the cup. But confidence must be high, you'd think, surely, after such a hilarious comeback against Hibernian at the weekend.
Yeah, no, that comeback against Hibs had all of it. Fans on the park, managers on their arse, David Gray, former professional footballer, failing to kick a water bottle. It had it all, and to make it sweeter, it put Hibs plumb last. So that was relatively fun. But no, like you say, I think there'll be a team that's confident. There'll be a team that's motivated as well. They're in a high position in the league, a point off Rangers in third. Jim Goodwin as well, making his return at Pittodrie with a point to prove. Teams, like we've mentioned before, teams will be determined to be the one that gives Aberdeen their first loss in that column. So I think it'll be a confident and motivated team that are going to try and probably frustrate Aberdeen, I think, and get us off our game.
Yeah, I think so. Touch on it now since you mentioned Jim Goodwin will likely have that extra motivation. I think given how disastrously things ended with us, and then the fact that he's gone to Dundee United, okay, got relegated, but got them back at the first time of asking, and they're doing well so far this season. He will have that extra motivation, you feel like, despite him not saying it. And DUFC stats on Twitter let us know that, of course, he will have that extra motivation. And given he ran on the pitch and fell on his backside at our winner versus Hibs, I'm sure he'd love to do the same on Saturday. And although it would be hilarious to see him fall on his ass again, how fuming would you be if that was the case?
Oh, I could just see his smug interview on Sports Scene now, and even just the thought of that is slowly making my blood pressure rise. But yeah, no, I'm hoping, like we said, that it's not going to be a game that's going to cause too much of an issue, especially obviously in the build up to Rangers at home and then a League Cup semi final against Celtic. I think we're wanting to try and make everything as comfortable as possible, but I don't think by any means it's going to be a complete cakewalk. I don't think any of our games have been a complete cakewalk this year.
No, they've not. And we've made it more difficult for ourselves than need be at times. But it is Dundee United's best start to a league campaign in the top flight for a decade. And I suppose to see why, being only losing one game so far, 3 draws, 5 wins. That can't be correct. Is it? It might be correct. I'm not sure.
Yeah, because I think are they on 18 points? I can't remember. No.
Oh, God. Oh, for all the preparation we've done.
Bring back
Over half
Glenn.
an hour in. I know, Jesus.
Bring
Glenn,
back
sorry if you're tuning in. Regardless, but would you expect Dundee United to come up and try and frustrate Pittodrie? It's a big crowd. In previous years, when it's been a big crowd and things haven't gone our way, things have turned really, really quickly. And I know managers have commented on that not being the case now, but do you think they'll still try and play on that, and maybe with the fact Jim Goodwin's back, there might be that extra, a little bit of sourness in the crowd, or bitterness perhaps, if things start going against us. Will they try and frustrate us?
Yeah, I mean, I think most teams are probably going to have that tactic when they come to Pittodrie this season. Obviously, our form's been really good. It's the first time in a while where it feels like the entire stadium is sort of rallied around the cause and really all bought into the same idea of the football club. So I think really your best bet of beating an Aberdeen team that's playing like this is to try and suck the atmosphere out of the crowd a little bit. So I wouldn't be surprised if they came and really tried to frustrate us, with the classic sort of niggly fouls and slowing the game down and really not letting, creative players, whoever that might be on the day, get much time on the ball. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see Dundee United come in and just make it a really sort of tough and turgid game.
Yeah, and DUFC stats, I just said DFC, he will not appreciate that. Has also said that United's back three, Adebayoga, Gallagher and Holt, is slow. So we'll sit in deep with a low block, certainly not allowing the space in behind that Sockler had on Saturday for his goal. And we'll likely try and use wide players like Ferry, Trapanovsky or Middleton. He had his first start of the season last week, but got an assist, and I had an assist disallowed as well, and aimed to hit on the counter. So the players mentioned there, Ferry, Trapanovsky, Middleton, Sam Dolby, who scored at the weekend and had a goal disallowed, sort of Dundee United's main threats, and then they will look to make it difficult for us at the weekend with that low block, which in previous years we've really, really struggled to break down when teams have come in and sat in against us.
Yeah, and I think that is probably more the reason for looking at Duke and Sockler being in the team, just to try and have that pace and that direct running along with Keskinen to really go at the back line. In an Aberdeen jersey, Declan Gallagher looked like he just didn't know what to do when he had somebody running at him at speed. So if we can try and sort of target that, would probably be one of our better avenues, as opposed to maybe try to go long all the time. But I think as well, I think we've shown that we can cope for the most part with relatively quick attackers. Against Celtic, although they had their chances, I think we did pretty well at nullifying the likes of Kuhn, Johnston, Valley, Maida, all going forward. So no, I think it'll be a really good game of football, actually, if you're a neutral. I feel like it'll actually be quite an interesting watch to see how both teams tactically approach it. But yeah, I can see it having the potential to become one of those nail biting afternoons again, where you're just needing that one chance that comes, that one bit of quality maybe, if it is looking to get a little bit scrappy in the middle.
Yeah, well, it's been suggested again. The UFC stats coming in very handy here, so thank you very much for that. He suggests that we can exploit the fact that Dundee United's first choice centre midfielder, Sibbald and Docherty, are likely to miss out of this game. And he knows firsthand that McGrath is good on the ball, and with Nilsson and Clarkson, or perhaps Nilsson and Shinnie, you'd expect to have much more of the ball and they'll try and play on the counter. And he also highlighted Topi Keskinen. He's a bit worried about him because he looks direct, he can run at people. We know that's the case, and he's similar. He could hurt them similarly to how Tom Lawrence did against Rangers, where he got Declan Gallagher and Knots by running him through the middle, which would be very pleasing if that was the case. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, definitely. I think the main thing, once again, I think it comes down to two things really. I think it's going to be that midfield battle, similarly to Hearts. I think whoever can get control of midfield goes on to win the game. I think it's really, really key, especially with Dundee playing a three at the back. But I think equally as important is really seeing how Keskinen's end product's going to shape up. Against Celtic, I thought there was a couple of times he maybe could have been a bit smarter with his play when he got into the final third. So here's hoping that Keskinen's decision making's on point, and if it is Sockler who goes on to start, another goal to gain some confidence before heading back down to Hampden to hopefully keep improving his record at Hampden would be ideal.
Yeah, it certainly would be. There is, however, potentially the return of Louis Moult, who, as hurt us in the past at Aberdeen, more during his Motherwell days. However, it was mentioned that Dundee United's 3 strikers have 2 goals between them. So that's maybe a bit reassuring, but Sam Dalby, as I say, got a goal at the weekend, had 1 disallowed, and Middleton got the assist for both of them. So they're not going to be any pushovers, certainly, but I'm certainly expecting another crack of a game in this month and even the start of November. Very, very tasty and very, very exciting. I sort of feel like with sort of all the late drama and things that have been going on lately, that Scottish football's maybe at one of the best places it's been in for a while, because it seems really exciting and chaotic. However, we do have one last question from Gemma Forbes. Glenn, is that you? Would 4 points from these 2 games, Dundee United and Rangers, be seen as a decent return? Given they at home, should we be looking for all 6? Phil, we'll go with you first, and then we'll end on me.
Well, I thought Glenn was on holiday in Greece, but maybe he's gone for an operation holiday somewhere, and he'll be back as Gemma next week on the podcast. But who knows? Although a hair transplant's probably more likely than that. Sorry, Glenn, had to do it. No, personally for me, I think 4 points from the 2 games, I think should probably be an aim, in my opinion. Ideally, in an ideal world, we're taking 6. But I think 4 should really be an aim. I thought Rangers looked really poor against Kilmarnock, really unorganised, didn't really look to create too much, and their defence just didn't seem to stand up. It didn't seem to stand up at all to the sort of physical nature of Vassell and Watkins, or with the pace of Kennedy. Dundee United, as much as it's going to be a tough game, it's another one we should be looking at 3 points, especially at home. Saturday night football, keep the good times going, and minimum of a point against Rangers, but they look really, really beatable just now, which is potentially famous last words, and somebody might clip that. But it is always a tough game against Rangers, but we've got a relatively decent track record at Pittodrie as of late. So hopefully 4 points as the minimum. What about yourself? What's your thoughts?
I'd probably be happy with 4 on the basis that the one was against Rangers. If we drew with Dundee United and beat Rangers, I just find myself so annoyed that we've not won them both. I totally agree that I muted myself. I totally agree that we should be looking for 6 because we're flying. That being said, Dundee United are on actually decent form, and Rangers maybe not so much. So maybe it should be the other way around. But we're flying. They're both at home. It'll both be big crowds. There's no reason we shouldn't be going in trying to win them both and stay unbeaten.
Yeah, it would be ideal, and a start like this to the season, could be verging on a legendary status for some of the cohort. But for those of you that are interested in legends, I believe they're down to their final 20% of tickets for the Scottish Masters at the P&J in November. We ran a giveaway as part of the build up to the Celtic game to give away a pair of tickets that the podcast had been gifted. So congratulations to Gus Tawes, who won that after a name in the hat tombola, after correctly predicting Jack McKenzie, I believe, as the first booking at Parkhead. But as always, thank you, Calum. It feels weird that I'm thanking you and it's not Glenn doing this. But yeah, thank you, Calum, for joining this evening.
Not a problem. Thanks, Phil. I think you've stepped up quite nicely there. But just in case you were to forget, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe if you're new around here with the notification bell on so you know when we go live. Follow us on Twitter at RTG_podcast, Instagram at RTG.podcast. If you're listening in, follow us and leave us a nice 5-star review. Don't bother leaving a review if you're not going to give us 5-star. How about that?
Exactly. Make it tough. But as always, we'll continue to ramble about our suave Swede, and we'll continue to stay humble, and we hope you do too. Come on, you Reds.